Welcome back to Goodnight Stories. My name is Lyra, and I will be your guide into whatever book we decide to read tonight. From young readers to young adult novels, my hope is to give you a comfortable space to listen to a story while you work or doze. So, sit back, relax, grab a cup of tea if you'd like. Tonight we jump back into Erin Hunter's Dangerous Path, the 5th book in the original Warrior series. So, without further ado. Chapter 18. As Fireheart wearily pushed his way through the entrance to the camp, he spotted Bramblekit dashing toward him, almost falling over his paws in his eagerness to greet the returning warriors. "Did we win?" he asked. He stopped and stared round-eyed at Graystripe. "Who's this? Is he a prisoner?" "No, he's a ThunderClan cat," Fireheart replied. "It's a long story, Bramblekit, and I'm too tired to explain it now. Get your mother to tell you." Bramblekit took a step back, looking slightly crestfallen. Though he wouldn't remember it, Fireheart reflected he had suckled side by side with Graystripe's 2 kits. Goldenflower had cared for them in the few days they had spent in ThunderClan after Silverstream's death. The dark tabby kit eyed Graystripe suspiciously as the 2 warriors padded past him, and then turned to Tawny Kit as she came bounding up. "Look," he mewed, "there's a new cat in the clan." "Who is he?" Tawny Kit wondered. "A traitor," Darkstripe spat as he stalked past on his way to the warrior's den. "But then we're all traitors according to Bluestar." The 2 kids stared at him with total bewilderment in their faces. Fireheart fought down his fury. There was no time to start an argument with Darkstripe. But the warrior had no business letting his anger spill over onto the kits. Feeling an unusual pang of sympathy for Bramblekit, he turned back and meowed. "Yes, we did win. We keep Sunningrocks." Bramblekit gave a little joyous bounce. "Great, I'm going to tell the elders." He scurried off with Tawny Kit hard on his paws. "Those are Tiger Star's kits, aren't they?" asked Graystripe, curiously, watching them go. Yes, Fireheart didn't want to discuss them now. "Let's go see Cinderpelt and get patched up." Graystripe looked around as the 2 warriors crossed the burned-out clearing. "It's never going to be the same," he muttered despondently. "Next new leaf, you'll see," Fireheart replied, trying to cheer him up. He hoped Graystripe was only referring to the damage caused by the fire, and not a sense that he could never recover his old place within the clan. Everything will grow back stronger than before. Graystripe didn't reply. He didn't look as happy as Fireheart had expected him to be, as if he were beginning to doubt that the rest of his birth clan would accept him. And Fireheart could see the pain in his eyes that suggested he was already beginning to miss his kits. After all, he hadn't even had a chance to say goodbye. The returning warriors were gathering in Cinderpelt's clearing as Fireheart and Graystripe approached. The medicine cat looked up from pressing cobwebs against a wound in Cloudpaw's side. "Here's Fireheart now," she mewed, and added, "Great Star Clan, you look as if you've been fighting monsters on the Thunder Path." "It feels like it," Fireheart grunted, settling down to wait for Cinderpelt to check him over. He realized how much his wounds hurt. The one on his leg that Leopardstar had given him was still bleeding, and he bent his head to lick it. "What are you thinking? Bringing him back again?" Fireheart looked up to see Dustbelt glaring at Graystripe. "We don't want him here." "Who's we?" Fireheart asked, gritting his teeth. "I think he belongs here, and so does Sandstorm, and—" He broke off as Dustbelt pointedly turned his back. Graystripe shot an apologetic look at Fireheart. "They won't accept me," he mewed. "It's true, I left the clan, and now—" "Give it time," Fireheart tried to encourage him. "They'll come around." Privately, he wished he could believe it. Thanks to Bluestar's indifference, some of the ThunderClan cats would have no qualms over objecting to Graystripe's return. One more problem, Fireheart thought, to add to his worries about what was really going on in the forest. How could the clan hope to survive the destruction StarClan had prophesied, unless they were united? Fireheart wondered if Graystripe knew about the dark threat in the forest from RiverClan's medicine cat, the pack that StarClan had warned them of. Though Fireheart's fur prickled with dread, there was some comfort in knowing that Graystripe was back, and he would have his friend to rely on, whatever lay ahead. Fireheart began to lick his wound again, wishing that he could just enjoy the Grey Warrior's return for a few moments. "That's right, get it clean," Cinderpelt meowed as she came up to him. She sniffed the leg wound, and then rapidly checked his other injuries. "You'll be fine," she reassured him. "I'll give you some cobwebs for the bleeding, but apart from that, you just need to rest." "Have you seen Blue Star?" Fireheart asked, as Cinderpelt brought the cobwebs and laid them over the wound. "Is she badly hurt?" "A bite on her shoulder," replied the medicine cat. "I gave her a poultice of herbs, and she went back to her den." Fireheart struggled to his paws. "I'd better go and see her." "Okay, but if she's asleep, don't wake her. Clan business, whatever it is, can wait." And while Fireheart does that, she added to Graystripe, "I'll have a look at you." She gave his ear a quick lick. "It's good to have you back." At least some cats would welcome Graystripe, Fireheart told himself, as he padded across the clearing. The others would change their minds. Graystripe just needed time to prove that he would be a loyal member of ThunderClan again. "Fireheart," Sandstorm hailed him as he approached Blue Star's den. "Mousefur and I are going out to hunt." "Thanks," Fireheart mewed gratefully. "Are you all right?" Sandstorm drew closer, her eyes narrowing. "I thought you'd be pleased. We won the battle, and Graystripe has come home." Fireheart pressed his muzzle briefly against her flank. He felt a pang of relief that the ginger she-cat seemed to have forgiven him for going behind Blue Star's back to arrange the talk with WindClan. "I know, but I'm not sure that all the cats will accept Graystripe. They'll find it hard to forget that he loved a cat from another clan and then left us all together." Sandstorm shrugged. "That's in the past. He's here now, isn't he? They'll just have to put up with it." "That's not the point." Pain and weariness made Fireheart more irritable than he intended. "We can't afford quarrels just now. Can't you see that?" Sandstorm stared at him, anger flaring in her pale green eyes. "Sorry, I'm sure," she spat. "I was only trying to help." "Sandstorm, don't," Fireheart began, realizing too late that he'd said the wrong thing. But Sandstorm had already turned away and was stalking back toward the warrior's den, where Mousefur was waiting for her. Feeling even more despondent than before, Fireheart went on to Blue Star's den. When he looked through the entrance, he thought she was asleep, curled up in her nest, but almost at once her blue eyes blinked open and she raised her head. "Fireheart?" Her voice was dull. "What do you want?" "Just reporting, Blue Star." Fireheart slipped into the den and stood in front of his leader. "All the cats are back. There are no serious injuries as far as I can see." "Good." Sounding a little more interested, she added, "Your apprentice fought well today." Yes, he did. Fireheart felt a rush of pride in his kin. Whatever problems there had been with Cloudpaw in the past, no one could question his courage. "I think it's time he became a warrior," Blue Star went on. "We'll hold his naming ceremony at sunset." Hope flared in Fireheart's chest. Had Blue Star finally accepted the need to make new warriors? But his optimism ebbed away like water into sand when Blue Star's lips curled into a sneer and she added, "There must be a ceremony, I suppose. It means nothing to me. But these cats are so gullible they'll never accept Cloudpaw without one." "And how much meaning does the ceremony have for Cloudpaw?" Fireheart asked himself. "Does he really care about the warrior code?" If not, he reflected, then the young cat didn't deserve to become a warrior, no matter how well he fought. But Blue Star had made up her mind, and Fireheart wouldn't try to change it. Instead, he suggested, "Swiftpaw should be a warrior too. He did well today." Swiftpaw carried a message back to the camp. "That's apprentice work. He's not ready to become a warrior yet." "But he came back to the battle," Fireheart objected. "No," Blue Star's tail lashed in anger. "I cannot trust Swiftpaw. Cloudpaw is stronger and braver, and besides, he doesn't grovel to StarClan like the rest of you. The clan needs more warriors like that." Fireheart wanted to say that Cloudpaw's lack of respect for the warrior code was the last thing ThunderClan needed, but he did not dare. Instead, he dipped his head and backed away. "I'll see you at sunset," he meowed, and went to break the news to Cloudpaw. His apprentice, as Fireheart had guessed, was delighted at the news that he was to become a warrior at last. Fireheart instructed him on what he had to do in the ceremony, and then headed for the warrior's den in some much-needed sleep. His heart sank right to his paws when he spotted Longtail sitting with the apprentices outside their den. There was one more thing he had to do before he could rest. Padding towards Longtail, he jerked his muzzle for the tabby warrior to join him out of earshot of the apprentices. Longtail, he began, searching for the right words. I'm sorry, I've got some bad news. Blue Star has agreed to make Cloudpaw a warrior, but not Swiftpaw, Longtail finished angrily. That's what you're going to say, isn't it? I'm sorry, Longtail, he meowed. I tried to persuade Blue Star, but she wouldn't agree. So you say, the pale warrior sneered. But it's strange that your apprentice is chosen and mine is ignored. Swiftpaw never went off to live with Two Legs. I'm not going into all of that again, Fireheart retorted. Cloudpaw had never intended to leave the clan, but every cat knew that he had visited the Two-Leg nest regularly for food before the Two Legs captured him and shut him in. Blue Star said she's making Cloudpaw a warrior because he has fought well, while Swiftpaw took a message. Longtail's tabby fur bristled with fury. And who made him take it? He would have stayed to fight if you hadn't sent him away. I know that, Fireheart mewed wearily. I'm just as disappointed as you are. I'll do my best to get Swiftpaw made a warrior soon, I promise. If I believed that, I'd believe anything, Longtail spat. He turned his back on Fireheart, scraped angrily at the ground as if he were covering his dirt, and stalked back to the apprentices. The sun was sinking behind the wall of the camp when Fireheart emerged from the warrior's den with Graystripe close behind him. Sleep had restored his body, and he tried to feel optimistic about the coming ceremony, even though he was not looking forward to it. Shadows were stretching across the camp, and Fireheart saw that Blue Star had emerged from her den. To his relief, she was moving easily, and the shoulder wound she had taken in the battle didn't seem to be bothering her, as she sprang up onto the high rock. Let all cats old enough to catch their own prey join beneath the high rock for a clan meeting, she called. Graystripe gave Fireheart a friendly nudge. You've done well with Cloudpaw, he meowed. I never thought that pest of a kit would grow up into such a fine warrior. Fireheart acknowledged his friend's praise by pressing his muzzle against the gray warrior's shoulder. His friend remembered how upset he had been when Cinderpelt had her accident, and knew how much it meant to Fireheart to have an apprentice ready to be made a warrior at last. Graystripe had seen his own apprentice, Brackenpaw, made a warrior long ago. Many of the cats were already in the clearing. News of Cloudpaw's warrior ceremony must have spread around the camp. Cinderpelt appeared from her den and took her place near the base of the rock, while Goldenflower brought her 2 kits to sit at the front of the gathering crowd. Willowpelt's litter stayed with her mother near the entrance to the nursery. Fireheart couldn't help noticing that the other apprentices were the last to join the circle around the rock. He saw Brightpaw nudging Swiftpaw out of their den. Even when the black and white cat had crossed the clearing, he stayed on the very edge of the crowd, and the other apprentices settled down around him. A pang of dismay shot through Fireheart. It wasn't Cloudpaw's fault that Blue Star had chosen him and none of the others. It would be hard for him not to have the good wishes of his friends when he became a warrior. But Cloudpaw didn't seem bothered. He strolled out of the elder's den and padded across to Fireheart with his tail waving in the air, his eyes shining with excitement. Fireheart murmured into his ear, I'm very proud of you, Cloudpaw. Tomorrow you can take a hunting patrol over to Two-Leg Place and tell Princess. Cloudpaw shot him a delighted look, but before he could say anything, Blue Star spoke. Cloudpaw, you fought well against RiverClan this morning, and I have decided that the time has come for you to take your place as a warrior in ThunderClan. The White Tom turned to face the high rock and gazed up at his leader as she began to speak the ritual words. I, Blue Star, leader of ThunderClan, call upon my warrior ancestors to look down on this apprentice. He has trained hard to understand the ways of your noble code, and I commend him to you as a warrior in his turn. Her voice was harsh, and Fireheart thought that it was obvious that she was merely going through the motions of a ritual that had ceased to have meaning for her. Uneasily, he wondered whether StarClan would be willing to watch over Cloudpaw when neither he nor his leader had any respect for their warrior ancestors. Cloudpaw, Blue Star continued, do you promise to uphold the warrior code and to protect and defend this clan, even at the cost of your life? I do, Cloudpaw meowed fervently. Did he understand what he was promising? Fireheart wondered. He was sure that Cloudpaw would do his best to protect the clan, because these cats were his friends, but he knew that the young cat wouldn't be prompted to act by any sense of loyalty to the warrior code. Then by the powers of StarClan, I give you your warrior name, Blue Star went on, each word dragged out of her like thorns. Cloudpaw, from this moment you will be known as Cloudtail. StarClan honors your courage and your independence, and we welcome you as a full warrior of ThunderClan. Leaping down from the high rock, she padded over to Cloudtail and rested her muzzle on his head. Cloudtail gave her shoulder a respectful lick, then went over to stand beside Fireheart. This was the moment at which the clan should have greeted the new warrior by chanting his name, but now there was only silence. Fireheart heard uneasy murmurs start up around him, as if the cats had sensed Bluestar's lack of conviction when she recited the ritual. Flicking a glance at the apprentices at the edge of the crowd, Fireheart saw that they were all looking at their paws, and Swiftpaw had turned his back on his old den-mate entirely. Cloudtail was beginning to look a little crestfallen when Brindleface, who had suckled him as a tiny kit, padded up and pressed her tabby muzzle against his. "Well done, Cloudtail," she exclaimed. "I'm so proud of you." As if she had given a signal, Cinderpelt and Graystripe came up, and then at last the other cats began to crowd around, greeting Cloudtail by his new name and congratulating him. Fireheart breathed a sigh of relief that the awkward moment was over, but he couldn't help noticing that Longtail was nowhere to be seen, and the apprentices waited until the very end to come up, led by Brightpaw, each mewing a few quick subdued words before slipping away again. Swiftpaw was not among them. "You're keeping vigil tonight," Fireheart reminded his former apprentice, trying to sound as if this were like any other warrior naming ceremony. "Remember, you have to stay silent until dawn." Cloudtail nodded and padded off to take up a position in the center of the clearing. His head and tail were raised proudly, but Fireheart knew that the ceremony had been shadowed by the jealousy of the other apprentices, and by Bluestar's transparent loss of faith. How long could the clan survive, Fireheart wondered, when their leader no longer honored StarClan? Chapter 19. The next morning, Fireheart watched the dawn patrol leave before going to relieve Cloudtail from his vigil. His injured leg felt stiff, but the bleeding had stopped. "All quiet?" he meowed. "Do you want to sleep now, or are you up for going hunting? We could go through Tall Pines if you like and see Princess." Cloudtail stretched his jaws in an enormous yawn, but a heartbeat later he had sprung to his paws. "Let's hunt." "Okay," Fireheart mewed. "We'll take Sandstorm with us. She has met Princess too." Fireheart knew that his closeness to Sandstorm had been trickling away ever since he had stopped the battle with WindClan. He desperately wanted to restore their previous bond, and inviting her to go hunting might be a good way to do that. Glancing around to see if she had emerged from the den, he spotted Dustpelt padding toward him, with Fernpaw following. As they drew closer, Fireheart could see that the light brown warrior looked worried. "There's something you ought to know," Dustpelt announced. "Fernpaw, tell Fireheart what you just told me." Fernpaw's head was lowered, and she scuffled in the dust with her front paws. Her hesitation gave Fireheart time to wonder what was troubling her, and why she had chosen to confide in Dustpelt instead of her mentor, Darkstripe. The second question was answered as Dustpelt bent his head and gave her ear a couple of licks. Sorry about that. Cat was getting into a cabinet. The second question was answered as Dustpelt bent his head and gave her ear a couple of licks. Fireheart had never seen the prickly young warrior so gentle. "It's okay," Dustpelt mewed. "There's nothing to be scared of. Fireheart won't be angry with you." The glare he gave Fireheart, unseen by Fernpaw, said he'd better not. "Come on, Fernpaw," Fireheart tried to sound encouraging. "Tell me what is the matter." Fernpaw's green eyes flickered toward him and away again. "It's Swiftpaw," she mewed. She hesitated this time with a glance at Cloudtail, and then went on. "He was really angry that Bluestar wouldn't make him into a warrior. Last night he got all of us apprentices together in the den. He said we'd never be warriors unless we did something so brave that Bluestar couldn't go on ignoring us anymore." She paused again, and Dustpelt murmured, "Go on." "He said we ought to find out who has been killing prey in the forest," mewed Fernpaw, her voice shaking. "He said you didn't seem bothered about finding our enemy. He wanted us to go to Snake Rocks because that's where most of the scraps of prey had been found." Swiftpaw thought we might pick up a trail. What a mouse-brained idea, Cloudtail burst out. And what did the rest of the apprentices think about this? Fireheart asked, shooting a warning glance at Cloudtail, trying to ignore the cold lump of apprehension that was gathering in his belly. We didn't know. We want to be warriors, but we all know we shouldn't do something like that without orders, and without at least one warrior with us. In the end, only Swiftpaw and Brightpaw went. Did you see them go when you were on vigil? Fireheart demanded, turning to look at Cloudtail. Beginning to look worried, Cloudtail shook his head. Swiftpaw said Cloudtail wouldn't notice a two-legged monster roaring through the camp, Fernpaw mumbled. He and Brightpaw sneaked out through the ferns behind the elder's den. When was this? Fireheart demanded. I'm not sure. Before dawn. Fernpaw's voice rose as if she were about to start wailing like a tiny kit. I didn't know what to do. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't want to give them away. Only I've been feeling worse and worse, and so I saw Dustpelt. I went to tell him. She gave the brown tabby warrior a grateful glance, and he pressed his muzzle against her speckled gray flank. We'll have to go after them, Fireheart decided. I'm coming, Cloudtail meowed, instantly startling Fireheart by the blaze in his blue eyes. Brightpaw's out there, and if anything hurts her, I'll shred it. Okay, Fireheart agreed, surprised to realize that the young warrior cared so transparently for his former den mate. Go and fetch a couple more cats to come with us. As the new warrior shot off, Dustpelt meowed, We'll come too. I don't want the apprentices involved, Fireheart replied. Fernpaw is upset enough as it is. Why don't you take her hunting? Take Ashpaw and Darkstripe as well. The clan needs fresh kill. Dustpelt gave him a long look. Then he nodded. Okay. Fireheart wondered whether he ought to tell Bluestar what was going on before they left, but he was reluctant to get Swiftpaw into trouble and give the clan leader another excuse for why the young cat shouldn't become a warrior. If we can fetch them back, Bluestar need never know, he told himself. Besides, Fireheart didn't want to waste a single moment. Cloudtail was already returning with Sandstorm and Graystripe hard behind him. Just the cats I'd have chosen, Fireheart thought. He couldn't ignore the warm feeling at the thought that Graystripe was home again, and they could hunt and fight together as they used to. The Grey Warrior's eyes were shining as he fell into his accustomed place at Fireheart's side. Fireheart wished he could have had Whitestorm, too. He was Brightpaw's mentor, but he had gone out with the Dawn Patrol. Sandstorm looked her usual self, alert and focused on their mission. Cloudtail told us, she meowed briskly. Let's go. Fireheart took the lead out of the camp and up to the top of the ravine. Almost at once, he picked up Swiftpaw's and Brightpaw's scent, leading directly toward Snake Rocks. There was no need to spend time trying to track them. All they had to do was get to Snake Rocks as soon as possible. But we'll be too late, he thought, if they meet whatever's out there. He raced through the forest, his paws scattering fallen leaves. The stiffness in his injured leg was forgotten. Graystripe ran close beside him, and Fireheart recognized the comfort of facing danger with his friend by his side once again, even though so much had changed. As they approached Snake Rocks, Fireheart slowed down and signaled with his tail for the other cats to do the same. If they dashed straight in without knowing what they had to face, they would be no help to the apprentices. They had to treat this threat, whatever it was, like any other enemy. But something inside Fireheart screamed that it was unpredictable, far beyond the reach of any clan code, and that he was in more danger than he had ever been in before. Was this how mice and rabbits felt, he wondered, knowing that death could be stalking through the undergrowth? Everything was still. Fireheart did not want to risk calling to the apprentices in case he alerted whatever was lurking up ahead. Swiftpaw must be right, he realized. This was the center of the darkness that had poisoned the forest, but he began to doubt his theories about what the threat was. Could one dog really cause so much destruction and fear in the forest? As cautiously as if he were stalking prey, Fireheart slid through the undergrowth until the smooth, sand-colored sides of Snake Rocks came into sight. For a few heartbeats he stood and tasted the air. A mixture of scents reached him, Swiftpaw's and Brightpaw's, still fresh, the staler scent of old ThunderClan cats, dog, as Fireheart had expected, but over it all the stench of newly spilled blood. Sandstorm turned to look at him, her eyes huge with fear. Something terrible has happened. Terror coursed through Fireheart. He was about to confront the source of the fear that had stalked him for more than a moon, the faceless enemy that had invaded their forest. He was barely able to make himself go on. With a twitch of his tail, he gestured for his companions to move forward again. Now they crept with their bellies close to the ground, intent on seeing without being seen, until the rocks were only a few fox lengths away. A fallen tree barred their way. Scrambling onto the trunk, Fireheart looked out over an open space carpeted with dead leaves. Foul-tasting bile rose in his throat as he took in the scene in front of him. The leaves had been churned up by massive paws, and clots of earth sprayed upward to catch in the branches of the trees. In the middle of the clearing, Swiftpaw's black and white body lay motionless, and just beyond him, Brightpaw. "Oh no," whispered Sandstorm, as she drew herself up to crouch on the trunk beside Fireheart. "Brightpaw!" yelled Cloudtail. Without waiting for Fireheart's order, he launched himself across the clearing toward her. Fireheart tensed, waiting for whatever had hunted down these apprentices to emerge from the trees and attack, but nothing stirred. Feeling as if his legs hardly belonged to him, he sprang down and stumbled across to Swiftpaw. The apprentice lay on his side, his legs splayed out, his black and white fur was torn, and his body was covered with dreadful wounds, ripped by teeth far bigger than any cat's. His jaws still snarled and his eyes glared. He was dead, and Fireheart could see that he had died fighting. "Great StarClan, what did this to him?" he whispered. For moons he had been afraid, and now it was far worse than he could imagined. Swiftpaw had been slaughtered like prey. The hunters in the forest had become the hunted. Something had happened in the forest. The balance of life had changed, and for a moment Fireheart felt the ground beneath his paws shift. Graystripe and Sandstorm stared down at Swiftpaw's body, too stunned to reply. Fireheart knew that Graystripe was remembering another blood-stained body, all his grief for Silverstream reawakening. "What a waste," Fireheart murmured sadly. "If only Bluestar had made him a warrior. If only I'd let him fight instead of sending him." He was interrupted by a screech from Cloudtail. "Fireheart! Fireheart, Brightpaw isn't dead!" Fireheart spun around and raced across the clearing to crouch beside Brightpaw. Her white and ginger fur, which she had always kept so neatly groomed, was spiky with drying blood. On one side of her face the fur was torn away, and there was blood where her eye should have been. One ear had been shredded, and there was huge claw marks across her muzzle. Fireheart heard a choking sound as Sandstorm came up behind him. "No," the ginger she-cat whispered. "Oh, StarClan, no." At first Fireheart thought Cloudtail was wrong and that Brightpaw must be dead, until he saw the very faint rise and fall of her breathing, and the blood bubbling in her nostrils. "Fetch Cinderpelt," he ordered. Sandstorm dashed off while Graystripe stood beside Swiftpaw's body, all his senses alert in case their fearsome enemy should return. Fireheart went on looking down at the injured Brightpaw. Somehow his fear had drained away. He felt nothing but an icy calm and a stern, ferocious determination to avenge the young apprentices. He asked StarClan to be with him and to give him the strength to unleash all of their fury on whatever had dared to wreak such havoc. Cloudtail curled himself close to the motionless apprentice and began licking her face and the fur around her ears. "Don't die, Brightpaw," he begged. "I'm with you now. Cinderpelt's coming. Hold on just a bit longer." Fireheart had never heard him sound so distraught. He hoped the white cat would not have to suffer the pain he had felt when Spotted Leaf died, or Graystripe when he'd lost Silverstream. One of Brightpaw's ears twitched under Cloudtail's gentle tongue. Her remaining eye opened, a slit, and closed again. "Brightpaw," Fireheart leaned close to her and spoke urgently. "Brightpaw, can you tell us what did this to you?" Brightpaw's eyes opened wider, and she fixed a cloudy gaze on Fireheart. "What happened?" he repeated. "What did this?" A thin wailing came from Brightpaw, which gradually formed into words. Fireheart stared at her in horror as he made out what she was trying to say. "Pack, pack," she whispered. "Kill, kill." Chapter 20. "Will she live?" Fireheart asked anxiously. Cinderpelt let out a weary sigh. She had come to Snake Rocks as fast as her uneven legs could run and done her best to patch up the worst of Brightpaw's injuries with cobwebs to stop the bleeding and poppy seeds for the pain. At last the apprentice had recovered enough to be dragged back through the forest to the camp, and now she lay unconscious in a nest amongst the ferns near Cinderpelt's den. "I don't know," Cinderpelt admitted. "I have done the best I can. She's in the paws of StarClan now." "She's a strong cat," Fireheart meowed, trying to reassure himself. When he looked at Brightpaw now, curled among the ferns, she looked anything but strong. She seemed smaller than a kit, no more than a scrap of fur. Fireheart half expected each shallow breath to be her last. Even if she recovers, she'll be hideously scarred, Cinderpelt warned him. "I couldn't save her ear or eye. I don't know that she'll ever be a warrior." Fireheart nodded. He felt sick as he forced himself to look at the side of Brightpaw's face, now swathed in cobwebs. All this reminded him of Cinderpelt's accident, when Yellowfang had told him that the young she-cat's leg would never heal properly. "She said something about the pack," he murmured. "I wonder what it was she really saw." Cinderpelt shook her head. "It's what we've been afraid of all along. There's something in the forest hunting us down. I heard it in my dream." "I know," Fireheart's muscles tensed with regret. "I should have done something long ago. StarClan sent that warning to Bluestar, too." "But Bluestar has no respect for StarClan anymore. I'm surprised she even listened to them." "Do you think that's why this happened?" Fireheart spun around and faced the medicine cat. "No." Cinderpelt's voice was strained as she moved closer to Fireheart and pressed herself against him. "StarClan did not send this evil, I'm sure of that." As she spoke, a rustling in the fern tunnel announced the arrival of Cloudtail. "I thought I told you to get some rest," Cinderpelt meowed. "I couldn't sleep." The white cat padded over to settle himself in the ferns beside his friend. "I want to be with Brightpaw." He bent his head to give her shoulder a gentle lick. "Sleep well, Brightpaw. You're still beautiful," he murmured. "Come back to us. I don't know where you are now, but you have to come back." He went on licking her for a moment more, and then looked up to fix a hostile glare on Fireheart. "This is all your fault," he burst out. "She and Swiftpaw should have been made warriors, and then they wouldn't have gone off on their own." Fireheart met his kin's gaze steadily. "Yes, I know," he mewed. "I tried, believe me." He broke off as he heard the soft paw steps of another cat and turned to see that Bluestar was approaching. Fireheart had sent Sandstorm to fetch her, and the ginger warrior followed her into the medicine cat's clearing. The clan leader stood and looked down at Brightpaw in silence. Cloudtail raised his head challengingly, and for a heartbeat Fireheart thought he was going to accuse Bluestar of being responsible for Brightpaw's terrible injuries as well. But Cloudtail stayed silent. Bluestar blinked a couple of times and asked, "Is she dying?" "That's up to StarClan," Cinderpelt told her, catching Fireheart's eyes. "And what mercy can we expect from them?" Bluestar growled. "If it's up to StarClan, Brightpaw will die." "Without even being a warrior?" mewed Cloudtail. His voice was quiet and sorrowful, and he bent his head again to lick Brightpaw's shoulder. "Not necessarily," Bluestar spoke reluctantly. "There is a ritual, thankfully little used. If a dying apprentice is worthy, she can be made into a warrior so that she may take a warrior name to StarClan." She hesitated. Fireheart held his breath in disbelief. Would Bluestar really put aside her anger at their ancestors to acknowledge the importance of StarClan in a warrior's life? Was she about to admit that Brightpaw had been denied the warrior status she deserved? Cloudtail looked up at the gray she-cat again. "Then do it," he growled. Bluestar did not react to being ordered around by her newest warrior. As Fireheart and Cinderpelt looked on, pelts touching for comfort, and Sandstorm approached to bear silent witness, the clan leader dipped her head and began to speak. "I ask my warrior ancestors to look down on this apprentice. She has learned the warrior code and has given up her life in service of her clan. Let StarClan receive her as a warrior." Then she paused, and her eyes blazed with anger that burned like coal fire. "She will be known as Lost Face, so that every cat knows what StarClan did to take her from us," she growled. Fireheart stared at his leader in horror. How could she use this terribly wounded apprentice in her war against the warrior ancestors? "But that's a cruel name," Cloudtail protested. "What if she lives?" "Then we will have all the more reason to remember what StarClan have brought us to," Bluestar replied, her voice barely more than a whisper. "They will have this warrior as Lost Face or not at all." Cloudtail held her gaze for a moment longer. The light of challenge in her his blue eyes, and then dipped his head as if he knew there was no point in arguing. Let StarClan receive her by the name of Lostface, Blue Star finished. She bent her head and lightly touched her nose to Lostface's head. There, it is done, she murmured. As if the touch had roused her, Lostface's eyes opened, and a look of terrible fear flooded into them. For a moment she struggled back to wakefulness. Pack, she gasped. Kill. Blue Star recoiled, her fur bristling. What? What does she mean? She demanded. But Lostface had sunk into unconsciousness again. Blue Star looked wildly from Cinderpelt to Fireheart and back again. What did she mean? She repeated. I don't know, Cinderpelt mewed uneasily. That's all she will say. But Fireheart, I told you, Blue Star was struggling to speak. StarClan showed me an evil in the forest, and they called it Pack. Is it the Pack that has done this? Cinderpelt avoided her eyes, going instead to check on Lostface. Fireheart sought for an answer that would satisfy his leader. He did not want Blue Star to know that her cats were being hunted down as if they were prey for some nameless, faceless enemy, but he knew that she would not be satisfied by empty reassurances. No cat knows, he replied at last. I'll warn the patrols to be on their guard, but if StarClan has abandoned us, patrols will not help us, Blue Star finished scornfully. Perhaps they have even sent this pack to punish me. No, Cinderpelt faced her leader. StarClan did not send the pack. Our ancestors care for us, and they would never disrupt the life of the forest or destroy a whole clan for a single grudge. Blue Star, you must believe this. Blue Star ignored her. She padded over to Lostface and stood looking down at her. Forgive me, she mewed. I have brought down the wrath of StarClan on you. Then she turned away toward her den. Almost as soon as she had gone, an agonizing wail broke out in the main clearing. Fireheart raced through the ferns to see that Longtail and Graystripe were bringing Swiftpaw's body back for burial. When the limp black and white shape had been laid in the center of the clearing, his mentor crouched beside him, touching his nose to his fur in the ritual position of mourning. Swiftpaw's mother, Goldenflower, sat next to him, while Bramblekit and Tawnykit, Swiftpaw's half-brother and half-sister, looked on with wide, scared eyes. A fresh wave of grief flooded through Fireheart. Longtail had been a good mentor to Swiftpaw. He did not deserve the pain he was going through now. Returning to Cinderpelt's clearing, he saw that Sandstorm had padded over to stand beside the medicine cat, who was pressing fresh cobwebs onto the blood-soaked dressings. Maybe she'll pull through, she mewed. If any cat can help her, you can, Cinderpelt. Cinderpelt looked up and blinked gratefully. Thanks, Sandstorm, but healing herbs can only do so much, and if Lostface lives, she might not thank me. She caught Fireheart's eye, and he saw in her face a fear that the injured cat would be unable to cope with her horrifically changed appearance. What future lay ahead for a cat whose scars would remind her forever of this living nightmare? I'll still look after her, vowed Cloudtail, glancing up from his gentle licking. Fireheart felt a burst of pride. If only his former apprentice could show the same unquestioning loyalty to the warrior code, he would be one of the finest warriors in ThunderClan. Sandstorm gently nosed Lostface and then drew away. I'll fetch some fresh kill for you and Cloudtail, she meowed to Cinderpelt, and a piece for Lostface too. She might want something if she wakes up. Determinedly optimistic, she padded out into the clearing. I don't want to eat anything, mewed Cloudtail. His voice was dull and exhausted. I feel sick. You need to sleep, Cinderpelt told him. I'll give you some poppy seeds. I don't want poppy seeds either. I want to stay with Lostface. I'm not asking you what you want. I'm telling you what you need, Cinderpelt retorted. You kept vigil last night, remember? More gently, she added, I promise I'll wake you if there's any change. While she went to fetch the seeds, Fireheart gave his kin a sympathetic glance. She's the medicine cat, he pointed out. She knows what's best. Cloudtail didn't reply, but when Cinderpelt came back carrying a dried poppy head and shook a few seeds out in front of him, he licked them up without complaining. Exhausted, he curled himself close to Lostface, and he was asleep within a few heartbeats. I never thought he would care for another cat as much as that, Fireheart murmured. You didn't notice? For all her anxiety, there was a glint of amusement in Cinderpelt's blue eyes. He's been patting after Brightpaw, Lostface, for a season now. He really loves her, you know. Seeing the two young cats curled up together, Fireheart couldn't believe it. Fireheart headed toward the pile of fresh kill. It was almost sun-high, but though the rays poured down brightly into the clearing, there was little warmth in them. Leaf Bear had come to the forest. Days had passed since Swiftpaw had been killed and Lostface injured. Fireheart had just been to check on her, and she still clung to life. Cinderpelt began to be cautiously optimistic that she would survive. Cloudtail spent nearly every moment with her. Fireheart had excused him temporarily from warrior duties so that he could care for the injured cat. As Fireheart crossed the clearing, he saw Graystripe emerge from the warrior's den and approach the fresh kill pile. Darkstripe overtook him before he reached it and shouldered him aside to snatch up a rabbit. Dustpelt, already choosing his own meal, gave Graystripe a hostile glare, and the Grey Warrior hesitated, unwilling to go any closer until the other two warriors had withdrawn to the nettle patch to eat. Quickening his pace, Fireheart came up beside his friend. "Ignore them," he muttered. "They keep their brains in their tails." Graystripe flashed him a grateful glance before picking a magpie out of the pile. "Let's eat together," Fireheart suggested, choosing a vole and leading the way to a sunny patch of ground near the warrior's den. "And don't let those two worry you," he added. "They can't stay hostile forever." Graystripe did not look convinced, but he said nothing more, and the two warriors settled down to eat. Across the clearing, Tawny-Kit and Bramble-Kit were playing with Willowpelt's 3 kits. Fireheart felt a pang of grief as he remembered how Lostface had sometimes played with them, as if she were looking forward to having kits herself. Would she ever be a mother to her own litter now? "I can't get over how much the kit looks like his father," meowed Graystripe after watching them for a moment. "Just as long as he doesn't behave like his father," Fireheart replied. He stiffened when he saw Bramble-Kit bowl over one of Willowpelt's much smaller kits, but relaxed again as the tiny tortoiseshell sprang up and hurled herself joyfully at Bramble-Kit. "It must be time he was apprenticed," remarked Graystripe. "He and Tawny-Kit are older than—" He broke off, and a distant sorrowful expression clouded his amber eyes. Fireheart knew that he was thinking of his own kits left behind in RiverClan. "Yes, it's time I was thinking about mentors," he agreed. Hoping to distract his friend from his bittersweet memories. "I'll ask Bluestar if I can mentor Bramble-Kit myself." "Who do you think would—" "You'll mentor Bramble-Kit," Graystripe stared at him. "Is that a good idea?" "Why shouldn't I?" Fireheart asked, feeling his fur start to prickle. "I haven't an apprentice, now that Cloudtail has been made a warrior." "Because you don't like Bramble-Kit," retorted Graystripe. "I don't blame you, but wouldn't he be better off with a mentor who trusts him?" Fireheart hesitated. There was some truth in what Graystripe said, but Fireheart knew that he couldn't give the task to any other cat. He had to have Bramble-Kit under his own guidance to make sure he stayed loyal to ThunderClan. "My mind's made up," he mewed curtly. "I wanted to ask you who you think would be good for Tawny-Kit." Graystripe paused as if he wanted to go on arguing, then shrugged. "I'm surprised you have to ask. There's an obvious choice." When Fireheart didn't speak, he added, "Sandstorm, you mouse brain." Fireheart took a mouthful of vole to give himself time to think of an answer. Sandstorm was an experienced warrior. She had been an apprentice along with Fireheart himself, Graystripe, and Dustpelt, and she was the only one of the 4 never to have an apprentice of her own. Yet something made him reluctant to give Tawny-Kit to her. Swallowing the vole, he meowed. "I more or less promised Snowkit to Brackenfur. It's only fair I should ask Bluestar if he can mentor Tawny-Kit, seeing as he was disappointed so recently. Besides, he's a fine warrior and he'll do a good job." Graystripe's eyes glowed briefly with pride. Brackenfur had been his apprentice, and he was clearly delighted to hear how well the young warrior was doing. Then he twitched his ears disbelievingly. "Come on, Fireheart, that's not the real reason, and you know it." "What do you mean?" "You don't want to give Tawny-Kit to Sandstorm because you're afraid of what Tigerstar might do." Staring at his friend, Fireheart knew that the Grey Warrior was right. The reason had been there in his mind, but he had refused to admit it, even to himself. "You want to protect her," Graystripe went on, when Fireheart didn't speak. "And what's wrong with that?" Fireheart demanded. "Tigerstar already encouraged Darkstripe to take the kits out of camp to visit him. Do you think that will be the end of it. Do you think he'll be content just to see them at gatherings? No, I don't. Graystripe gave an exasperated snort. But what will Sandstorm think? She's not some pretty little kitty pet hiding behind big, strong warriors. She can take care of herself. Fireheart shrugged uncomfortably. Sandstorm will just have to accept the decision. I'm sure Bluestar will agree to let Brackenfur have Tawny Graystripe's amber eyes gleamed in anticipation of trouble ahead. You're the deputy, but Sandstorm isn't going to like it, he predicted. You want to mentor Bramblekit? Asked Bluestar. Fireheart stood in her den. He had just raised the question of new apprentices, suggesting that they should hold the naming ceremony at sunset. Yes, he mewed, and Brackenfur to mentor Tawny Bluestar gazed at him with narrowed eyes. A traitor to mentor the son of a traitor, she rasped. Clearly she had no interest in who should mentor Tawny How suitable. Bluestar, there are no traitors in the clan now, Fireheart tried to assure her, pushing down his misgivings about Bramblekit. Bluestar gave a disdainful sniff. Do what you want, Fireheart. Why should I care what happens to this nest of rogues? Fireheart gave up his attempt to reason with her. Backing out of the den, he returned to the clearing. The sun was already going down, and the clan had begun to gather in anticipation of the ceremony. Fireheart spotted Brackenfur and called him over. I think you're ready for an apprentice, he announced. How would you like to mentor Tawny Brackenfur's eyes glowed. Do you really mean it? He stammered. That would be great. You'll do a fine job, Fireheart meowed. Do you know what to do in the ceremony? He paused as Sandstorm appeared from the warrior's den and began walking toward him. Hang on, Brackenfur, he muttered hastily. I'll be back in a moment. Then he went to meet the pale ginger warrior. What's this Graystripe tells me? Sandstorm demanded as soon as he was in earshot. Is it true that you asked Bluestar if Brackenfur could mentor Tawny Fireheart swallowed. Her green eyes were blazing with anger, and the fur on her shoulders bristled. Yes, it's true, he began. But I'm more experienced than he is. Fireheart resisted the urge to tell her the truth, so that Sandstorm knew he was doing it for her sake and for no other reason, but telling her that she wasn't going to mentor Tawny because he wanted to protect her from possible trouble with Tigerstar would make her even more furious. She would only think that he had judged her too weak to deal with the threat posed by the Shadow Clan leader. Well, Sandstorm insisted, don't you think I'm capable of being a good mentor? It's not that at all, Fireheart protested. Then what? Give me one good reason why I shouldn't mentor Tawny Because Fireheart cast around desperately for something he could tell her. Because I want you to lead extra hunting patrols. You're a brilliant hunter, Sandstorm, the best. And with Leaf Bear here, prey will be scarce again. We're really going to need you. As he spoke, he realized that what he said was true. Extra hunting patrols led by Sandstorm would be one way to solve the problem of feeding the clan through the bitter moons of Leaf Bear. Sandstorm, however, was not impressed. You're just making excuses, she meowed scornfully. There's no reason why I shouldn't lead hunting patrols and mentor Tawny She's bright and fast, and I bet she turns out to be a brilliant hunter, too. I'm sorry, Fireheart mewed. I've already asked Brackenfur to take Tawny I'll ask Bluestar to give you one of Willowpet's kits when the worst of Leaf Bear is over, okay? No, it's not okay, Sandstorm hissed. I haven't done anything to be passed over like this. I won't forget this in a hurry. She turned away and went to join Frostfur and Brindleface. Fireheart took a step after her, and then stopped. There was nothing he could say, and besides, Bluestar had just appeared from her den to call the clan to the meeting. As the clan assembled, Fireheart noticed Graystripe crouching alone not far from the high rock. Mousefur stalked pointedly past him on her way to sit with the other she-cats. Frustrated at the way some of the clan still refused to accept Graystripe, Fireheart wanted to go over and reassure him, but he had to stay where he was, ready for his part in the ceremony. A moment later, Cloudtail and Whitestorm appeared from the fern tunnel leading to Cinderpelt's den and settled down alongside the Grey Warrior to Fireheart's relief. Cinderpelt followed them out of the ferns and limped hurriedly over to Fireheart. As she drew closer, he saw that her blue eyes were sparkling. Good news, Fireheart, she announced. Lost Face just woke up and managed to eat some fresh kill. I think she's going to be okay. Fireheart let out a delighted purr. That's great, Cinderpelt. But for all his relief at the news, he couldn't help wondering how Lost Face would cope when she learned that her face was so terribly injured. She's already sitting up and trying to groom herself, Cinderpelt went on, but she's still very shaky. She'll need to stay in my den for a few days yet." "Has she said anything about what attacked her?" Cinderpelt shook her head. "I tried to ask her, but it upsets her too much to think about it. She still cries out pack and kill in her nightmares." "The clan needs to know," Fireheart reminded her. "Then the clan will have to wait," Cinderpelt assured sharply. "Lostface needs peace and quiet if she's going to get better." Fireheart wanted to ask her when she thought Lostface would be fit to talk to him, but he had to pay attention to the ceremony as Goldenflower came out of the nursery, flanked by her 2 kits. Fireheart could see she had groomed both of them especially carefully. Tawny Kit's ginger fur glowed like a flame in the daylight, in the dying sun, and Bramble Kit's dark tabby pelt had a glossy sheen. As they approached the high rock, Tawny Kit bounced around with excitement, but Bramble Kit seemed calm, padding forward with his head and tail held high. Fireheart wondered if this was what Tigerstar had looked like when he had first been made an apprentice. Had he shown the same promise of courage and a long life in the service of his clan? As his clan leader and his mentor had any idea of what he was destined to become? Bluestar called both kits forward to stand beside her at the foot of the high rock. Fireheart noticed that she was looking more alert than usual, and if even she could not be indifferent to the prospect of more warriors to fight for her clan. "Brackenfur," she began, "Fireheart tells me that you are ready for your first apprentice. You will mentor Tawnypaw." Looking nearly as excited as his new apprentice, Brackenfur stepped forward and Tawnypaw ran up to meet him. "Brackenfur," Bluestar continued, "you have shown yourself to be a warrior of loyalty and forethought. Do your best to pass these qualities to Tawnypaw." Brackenfur and Tawnypaw touched noses and withdrew to the side of the clearing, while Bluestar turned to Fireheart. "Now that Cloudtail is a warrior," she went on, "you are free to take on another apprentice. You will mentor Bramblepaw." Her eyes glittered as she gazed at Fireheart, and he realized with a flash of horror that she was suspicious of his motives in offering to train Tigerstar's son. Fireheart tried to meet his leader's icy gaze steadily. Whatever Bluestar thought, he knew that he was motivated by loyalty to his clan. Bramblepaw padded toward his mentor, and Fireheart went to meet him in the middle of the circle of cats. Looking down into the young cat's eyes, he felt both stirred and challenged by a blaze of enthusiasm there. "What a warrior he'll make," Fireheart thought, and then added silently, "If only he weren't Tigerstar's son." "Fireheart, you have shown yourself to be a warrior of rare courage and quick thinking," meowed Bluestar, her eyes narrowed. "I'm sure that you will pass on all you know to this young apprentice." Fireheart bent his head to touch noses with Bramblepaw. As he led the new apprentice back to the side of the clearing, Bramblepaw asked, "What do we do now, Fireheart? I want to learn everything, fighting and hunting and all about the other clans." In spite of his misgivings, Fireheart had to admit that Bramblepaw clearly knew nothing about his old hostility between his mentor and his father. That was thanks to Goldenflower, who sat looking at them with an unreadable expression. Fireheart guessed she wouldn't be too pleased that he had chosen to train Tigerstar's son himself. And what would happen when Tigerstar found out? He could feel Darkstripe watching him closely, and knew that the Dark Warrior would take the news to Tigerstar at the next gathering, if not before. "All in good time," Fireheart promised the eager apprentice. "Tomorrow we'll go with Brackenfur and your sister to tour the territory. Then you'll learn where the borders are and how to recognize the scents of the other clans." "Great!" Bramblepaw let out an excited squeak. "But for now," Fireheart went on as Bluestar drew the meeting to a close, "you can go and get to know the other apprentices. Don't forget you sleep in their den tonight." He flicked his tail in dismissal, and Bramblepaw dashed off to his sister's side as the other cats started to crowd around, congratulating the 2 new apprentices and calling them by their new names. Watching them, Fireheart saw Graystripe get up and come toward him, passing Sandstorm on the way. He heard the ginger she-cat meow, "Graystripe, aren't you sorry you weren't given an apprentice?" "In a way," Graystripe replied. He sounded awkward, shooting Fireheart a sideways glance as he spoke. "I can't expect one for a while. Half the clan haven't accepted me yet." "Then half the clan are stupid furballs," asserted Sandstorm, giving the Grey Warrior's ear a lick. Graystripe shrugged. "I know I'll have to prove my loyalty before I can mentor an apprentice again. And you'll have one soon," he added, as if he could read her mind, "when Willowpelt's kits are ready." An annoyed look flashed across Sandstorm's face. Fireheart wondered whether he ought to try talking to her again, but as she spotted his hesitant approach, she turned to Graystripe and meowed loudly. "Come on, let's see if there's any fresh kill left." Fireheart halted and watched miserably as Sandstorm got to her paws and led the way over to the pile of prey. Graystripe followed her, casting a worried glance at Fireheart as he went. Seeing Sandstorm turn her back on him, Fireheart felt bitter disappointment welling up inside him. However hard he tried, all his attempts to rekindle the old bond between him and Sandstorm seemed to be failing, and he missed her with a loneliness that could not be comforted by any other cat that thronged around him. And that's where we will stop. I hope everyone enjoyed listening. And I hope you have a good evening and a good night. Till next time, my friends. Take care.